to Best. Here he goes. And George Best sets a club scoring record.
I consider myself an entertainer. I mean, I think it was a big part of football, and I always tried to entertain people. I mean, it was show business as far as I was concerned.
Georgie, Georgie, they call you the Belfast boy. Georgie, Georgie, they call you the Belfast boy. They say, Georgie, Georgie, keep your feet on the ground. Georgie, Georgie, when you listen to the sound. Georgie, Georgie, put a light on your name. Hey, 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 play the game. Play the game. Oh, play the game. Just play the way the ball bounces and bounce the way the ball plays. Cause you won't have long in the limelight. No, you won't have many days. When you live and you play for United, with your life and your blood and your soul. You run and you kick and you fight it, and you learn every way to the goal. Georgie, Georgie, they call you the Belfast boy. Georgie, Georgie, they call you the Belfast joy. And they say, Georgie, Georgie, keep your feet on the ground. Georgie, Georgie, when you listen to the sound. Georgie, Georgie, put a light on your name. Yeah, 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 play the game.
Bobby Charlton, United moving forward again. Manchester there, George Best with a lot of room to work. Gibbons on his right. Best again. A glorious goal by Best. What a magnificent goal by Best.
Brian Kidd to George Best. Fitzpatrick. Best going in on it. Best! Oh, beautifully taken by Best! What a magnificent goal by Best!
George Best, for whom the word superstar could almost have been invented. A Pied Piper who attracted thousands to watch his unique artistry. Sadly, he was to become an enigma, unable to cope with his genius. A glittering career at the top was ended prematurely, and recent headlines have centred on his continuous battle against a drink problem. Many have said he wasted his talent, yet he's achieved much more than most people think. In 1968, he was named European Footballer of the Year, English Player of the Year, and helped Manchester United win the European Cup. He also won 2 league championship medals, as United won the First Division title in 1965 and 1967. A 15-year-old Best joined United as an amateur in 1961. In May 1963, he signed professional forms. In September that year, he made his first-team debut. In all, he was to spend almost 11 years at Old Trafford, playing a total of 464 first-team games, scoring 178 goals. Indeed, he's the last United player to score over 20 league goals in a season.
It was a dream come true for me. Well, it would have been for any kid. You know, 15 years old, basically for someone to just come up to you and say, you want to play for Manchester United? It was, well, you can't really describe how it was. And almost immediately, you know, within sort of 18 months, you know, 2 years, I was in the first team. You know, at the same time playing in the youth team, I was playing in Europe, basically. It was tremendous, yeah. And the fact that I played with so many great players was the icing on the cake.
Manchester United manager during those glory days in the 60s was Matt Busby. Having survived the Munich air disaster in February 1958, when 8 of United's team perished, Busby was in the process of building yet another great side, when Best arrived at Old Trafford in the early 60s. The Belfast boy would eventually cause his manager many problems, but the early days were blissful, and 20 years on, Best is still glowing in his praise of Busby as both man and manager.
A genius in both. I was going to say one of the nicest. He's probably the nicest human being I've ever met. He's one of those people. I mean, I remember my father going to Old Trafford for the first time, and he treated him like he was a king. And the next time he went back, my father, he remembered his name, he remembered the name of the kids, he remembered what he drank, where he lived. He just had this talent for making people feel at home. And it wasn't just because he was my father, he did it with everybody. And as a manager, I mean, he wanted football to be played the way it should be played. I mean, we didn't have team talks. He just gave us a ball and said, go out and enjoy yourself. I suppose he could do it with the players he had.
He not only was a great player, he was a great lad at one time. Very, very good. He was very, very good, actually, and very helpful. And even in his early days, when I used to ask him to go and play with some young boys and that type of thing, he used to join in, and when I'd say, I think he's had enough, he'd say, no, it's all right, boss. We'll carry on. And this was George at that time, and he was very, very good.
When you look back, do you now regret having given him a few bad times?
No, because I give him more good times than I ever give him bad times. You know, I look back and at the end of the day, I happen to believe that I was, let's say, a major help in winning the European Cup, and it was something he dreamed about. So I happen to believe that I helped fulfill a dream for him. And I think if you ask him himself, he'll tell you that all the bad times he'd forget for that one moment.
The cup they wanted was the European Cup. 100,000 expectant fans packed the stands to see great football. Bobby Charlton and Coluna exchanged Manchester United and Benfica pennants. The moment of truth in the battle for mastery of European soccer had arrived. United, playing in blue, kicked off. United launched directly into attack. Bobby Charlton took the ball into Benfica territory. Dangerous moments as the Portuguese defence tried to clear. Now Benfica came away. That mighty danger man Eusebio sent in a scorcher. It ricocheted off the crossbar. What an escape! Stepney, unrattled, collected the return effort and got United moving. George Best fell foul of the first of a series of savage tackles which marred the first half. Best again with the ball. He seemed to be a target for the stop-them-at-any-cost Benfica defence, but Italian referee Lobello let that one go. Benfica had the advantage, but met a stonewall United rearguard. Charlton was very unhappy with the ref's decision, and the visitors too had plenty to say for themselves. Benfica with the dangerous free kick. But what a great keeper Stepney proved himself. It was near the end of an unglamorous first half. No score by either side. With the eyes of the world on both teams and the hopes of every Briton behind United, the second half got underway. The Busby boys seemed fired with a new enthusiasm and stormed into the attack. United's football was full of fire. Enrique had to concede a corner to keep that one out. George Best was in terrific form, but so was Enrique. Benfica weren't going to let United run away with the match. They too showed they meant business. On the showing so far, United were proving the better side. Hard-working Best put the ball out to the left, where Sadler had been playing like a demon. The return centre was a beauty. Charlton headed it home. What a tonic for the fans. United won up in the 55th minute and going all out for another one. The match was by no means won. Benfica pulled off a beauty through Grassa. One all and time running out. Stepney was a wonder goalkeeper to stop that rocket from the big cannon boot of Eusebio, and the great Portuguese star sportingly acknowledged it. But that wasn't it. 90 minutes up and still deadlock. The teams were weary, but the fans weren't. With an extra 30 minutes of play ahead, bumps, bruises and tired muscles ached like they'd never ached before. But a wet sponge and a magic massage worked miracles. And so on into the first half of extra time. And what a 15 minutes it was. Stepney collected and fed his forwards. Waiting to receive was mighty Best. He simply walked the ball into the net. What a goal! United in the lead. And that wasn't all. The Busby Babes were raring to go. They hammered Benfica. Watch this fantastic goal. my, oh my, how they cheered Kid, the birthday boy, for that super header. Even Stepney joined in. The Benfica fire had nearly been extinguished. But where United finished, not on your life. Bobby Charlton made it 4-1. Manchester United had well and truly done it. They were supreme soccer champions of Europe. At last, Matt Busby, the maestro of Manchester United, had groomed a team great enough to beat Europe's best. He was king of soccer. His wonderful 11 men were all princes.
After the game, I felt an anticlimax because it was all over. And the following couple of seasons, it became more of an anticlimax because the team really was on the slide, really. I mean, when you look 4 years later, they were in the second division. So that's what I was trying to say. I could see that it was a little bit, you know, when it happened, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to the club. But after that was an anticlimax because it should have kept going. You know, we should have done a Liverpool. We should have kept winning trophies, winning the league, winning European Cups, and we didn't. We went the opposite, which for a club the size of Manchester United was a little bit frightening when you look at it. I mean, they're still my club. I still think of them as my club.
Winning the European Cup in 1968 was the pinnacle of success for that superb United team. They also won the First Division title twice. It was the era of George Best, Dennis Law and Bobby Charlton, three of the greatest individual players ever to grace the British game. A brilliant trio who enthralled packed grounds everywhere with skill and entertainment you won't find in the modern game. Dennis Law had joined United from Italian club Torino in 1962 for the then staggering fee of £115,000. The swashbuckling Scottish striker quickly became the king at Old Trafford. He recalls seeing the young pretender to his crown for the first time.
Well, of course, he was only a young boy. I think he came with another Irish lad, and I had just joined United. Of course, they were building just after the Munich disaster, and I saw him in the gym down at our training ground in Salford. Two young boys, and absolutely tremendous skill. As I say, United building up after the crash. We had had a bad start to the season, and we nearly went down that season, but in '63, and I remember the game here, it was at Old Trafford, and I didn't play, I was in the stand with Sir Matt Busby, and George placed against West Brom, and it was absolutely magnificent. It really was the start of the sort of side that United had in that '60s, of being a great side with the likes of Bobby Charlton, Nobby Stiles, Pat Crellin, David Herden, of course, this young lad who had come from Northern Ireland, young. I mean, when I came down from England, I was thin as well. I think I weighed about 8 stone. I think Bestie weighed about 7 stone. But you could see that he had everything. He had the skill, he was brave, he was good in the air. I mean, it sounds all cliches, you know, but he was good with both feet, he was brave, he scored goals, he never stopped running. Magnificent player.
Had he any weaknesses at all?
Can't think of any. Probably after, in the sort of the middle '60s going on towards the late '60s, when we really were a very, very good side. And we went to Benfica. We had taken a 3-2 lead. They were one of the great sides, probably the greatest side in Europe at that time. And we went there and we beat them 5-1. And Bestie had an absolutely magnificent game. And of course, it was the time of the Beatles as well. And he was a good-looking guy, black hair, the long hair, single. And after that game, of course, he was called, I think it was El Beatle or whatever it was, you know. And he just, if it was a weakness in him, he maybe at that time just began to be a little bit greedy. You know, sometimes he always beat 3 or 4 men, but he was trying to beat 5 or 6. So if it was a weakness, it maybe was around that time that maybe he should have passed the ball when he, earlier on. But that weakness is not a weakness as such. It is just maybe a little bit greedy, but appreciate it. But of course, at times, you know, I mean, we would. Do you know football? You know,
just a bit.
Well, when you're messing about in there and you knock a ball out, and Bestie's got it, and he was on the flanks, and he would beat 1 or 2, and the ball should be yours, you know. And he'd say, "Hey, Bestie, come on, let's give it to me." And he would beat another one, and he'd say, "Yeah, bang in the back of the net," you know. So you say, "You little."
Was he a complex person at all?
I mean, Bestie's had, as you are in the public eye, you get a tremendous amount of publicity. Sometimes, and a great many of the times, of course, it's not good. You know, and we've seen Bestie over the last 10 or 20 years, you know, had adverse publicity. But the one thing that people don't know, the people who know him do, and he is a terrific lad. He is a lovely lad, and he doesn't do any harm to anybody. He does a lot of good stuff, which is never really taken out and come out in the media, whether it be television, radio, or the press. And that's the one thing that a lot of people don't know about Bessie. You think he's a sort of, you know, sort of star, with a big, and he's, you know, he's always out doing the wrong things. But George Best is a lovely, lovely lad.
When I got in the team, I played exactly the same as I did when I was a kid. You know, I didn't want to give the ball away, you know, because, you know, I suppose I was better than the other kids. And I tended to play the same way in the First Division. And at times, I mean, they used to pull their hair out, both him and Bobby, you know, because I suppose, basically playing the same as I'd always played. That, of course, changed with, you know, a little bit of experience, you know. You became a little bit less selfish. But I can understand it, you know, because I know what I used to do. I mean, if I beat a player 6 times, I want to come back and beat him 7 times. So I can understand their frustration.
Completing that priceless threesome was Bobby Charlton. 106 times he played for England and was a key member of the England team which won the World Cup in 1966. At Manchester United, he's something of an institution. As a player, after surviving the Munich air crash, he went on to serve the club for 16 years, playing in over 600 games. Today, he's still at Old Trafford as a club director.
The legend is that the two of you didn't get on and you didn't turn up to play in this testimonial. Yet he said nice things to me about you. What was the relationship like with Bobby Charlton?
Okay, I mean, on the field, you know, we were teammates. And I think if you watch any old film clips and shots of the games, you know, if he scored, I was the first there to congratulate him, and vice versa. You know, because we played in the same team, and we were playing for the same end product. But off the field, you know, he had his way of living, and I had my way. You know, he was a family man. He went home to the family, and I went out and got, you know, and so socially we didn't mix, and that was it.
Well, I mean, George was a different age group from me. People used to say to me, you know, that you didn't get on with George Best. I got on with George Best quite all right. It was just that we were a different age group. I didn't go out with him because I went home. You know, I wasn't the lad that went out to nightclubs. I didn't drink particularly much. I had my own pals. But people who are a lot closer would probably answer that question better. Looking at it really from the outside, I would have to say really that some people whose intentions were very well-meaning with regard to George's own well-being, really he didn't listen to. He listened to the wrong type of people, I think.
Old Trafford at that time with all the players, he was a great fella. I think probably maybe the media were a bit to blame for what... They drove him mental. They wouldn't leave him alone wherever he went or whatever he'd done. They just wouldn't leave him alone. Being here at Old Trafford at that particular time and George being amongst him, he was a smashing little fella. He was no different from any of the rest of us.
Was he unlucky to be a good-looking Irishman and
I think that was his biggest problem, being good-looking.
Being dubbed El Beetle after that great game against Benfica, was that the beginning of the end, perhaps?
No, not really. I think the beginning of the end for George was when the team started getting a little bit older and there was a lot of pressure put on George that he was going to be the one that would have to do everything himself. But unfortunately, sometimes when you've got a great side, they stay together for a long, long period of time, maybe 8 or 9, 10 years, and then when you have to make a change, it's not one change, it's 5 or 6 at the same time, and it's difficult.
Now, you were something of a father figure to George, and in fact, he ended up living with your family for a time.
That was the only way I could get out. No, George was... I mean, it's difficult to explain to people because people sometimes believe what the press write, and George wasn't what the press wrote about him. He was a lovely fella and a quiet lad, and I couldn't speak more highly of him. All the things that he was supposed to have done in life just weren't true.
I was glad that I played with him rather than against him. As a fullback, I think it must have been hell at times because I can remember personally players like John Angus, right back at Burnley. I always remember John Angus because he's a good friend of mine, come from the same part of the country. And when you play against players and you talk about them, you talk to them socially before you actually play them. And George Best, I always remember turning John Angus, who was then quite a hard, tough fullback, and he turned him inside out, really. It was embarrassing to see a friend embarrassed like that, really. I mean, he was he had the ball through his legs, going in the direction that he thought George was going in, but never did. And that's one of the first matches when George first came into the team, against a very strong, capable fullback. But George didn't have any illusions about it. He thought that he was a fantastic player, and it didn't matter who he was playing against. He held no esteem to anybody. He was going to beat them, and it was quite impressive as a young player to see this happen. Embarrassing to see your friends humiliated sometimes, you know. But nevertheless, he was a fantastic little player. The problem with George was it never lasted long enough. But the period that he was here, I mean, he's held in awe here, you see, by the people at that particular time, because they'd never seen anything quite like it. And they were lucky that they saw it every week. And he was always brave, always positive, always wanted to do things. Absolutely marvellous player.
This football in the museum at Old Trafford is a lasting reminder to George of one of the more memorable moments in the Best career. It's the ball